Welcome to From the Pages of Power Slam, March 1996, and this is an issue that hits right at the fault line of modern professional wrestling because everything feels like it's colliding at once here. Companies, philosophies, styles, egos, and futures, with the WWF, WCW, ECW, and Japan all pulling in different directions while fans are trying to make sense of where the business is heading next. And in this issue, we are talking back to back Royal Rumble history, locker room exits and entrances, brutal honesty from Shane Douglas, Vader smashing through expectations, Nobuhiko Takada shaking Japan, and an undercurrent of war that never really leaves the page. This issue matters because Power Slam is not a hype magazine. It is analytical, skeptical, and unafraid to call things exactly as they see them. And in early 1996, that perspective is invaluable because wrestling is changing faster than fans can process it, and nobody is pretending otherwise. The issue opens with From the Top, an editorial that immediately frames the larger picture by looking at promotional wars, not as something new, but as something cyclical, tracing conflict back through territorial wrestling long before cable television rewrote the rules. The piece walks through how promoters once stayed in their lanes, how wars erupted when lines were crossed, and how the National Wrestling Alliance era still allowed territories to survive even after battles were lost. Then the article pivots sharply to 1984 when Vince McMahon Jr. reshaped the industry by going national, turning the WWF from a regional promotion into a coast-to-coast juggernaut and forcing other territories out of business. Against that backdrop, Power Slam points out the irony of the WWF portraying itself as a struggling family business in the billionaire Ted skits, despite having been the very force that crushed regional wrestling in the first place. And that tone, critical, historically aware, and unapologetic, defines the entire issue. That realism continues in Stateside, where Robbo examines what it actually means to work for the so-called Big Two, WWF and WCW, breaking down the trade-offs between guaranteed money and creative stagnation, between exposure and autonomy, between television time and career fulfillment. This is not starstruck writing. It is grounded, practical, and sometimes sobering, especially when it addresses how many wrestlers end up stuck in the middle, not protected enough to thrive, but too visible to disappear quietly. And it paints a picture of a business where success is never as simple as signing the biggest contract. The analytical voice carries into Vid Review, where Finn Martin breaks down Survivor Series 1995, In Your House 5, and Best of Japan Wrestling with a critical eye, comparing presentation, pacing, violence, and censorship, and singling out Japanese wrestling, particularly women's wrestling, as consistently superior in intensity and realism, a point Power Slam returns to often, positioning Japan as both an inspiration and a challenge to Western promotions. Then comes Manor's Matt Musings, where stately Wayne Manor unloads one of his trademark opinionated columns, taking aim at rankings, reputations, and what he sees as misplaced credibility, mixing sarcasm with sharp observation, blasting the Power Slam 50 while still engaging deeply with the wrestling it covers, and reinforcing that this magazine expects its readers to think critically, not just cheer reflexively. From there, the issue shifts into its major features, starting with Shawn Does It Again, the detailed breakdown of the Royal Rumble 1996, where Shawn Michaels becomes the first man to win back-to-back Rumbles, outlasting 29 other wrestlers and positioning himself once again for a WrestleMania main event. The article contextualizes the win by revisiting Shawn's failure the previous year against Diesel, framing this victory not as repetition but as redemption, and tying it directly to the looming showdown with Bret Hart, setting the emotional stakes for WrestleMania 12 and reinforcing long-term storytelling in a way the WWF had not always prioritized. That sense of transition continues with House Party 96, which looks at the Public Enemy's departure from ECW, treating it not just as an exit, but as a moment of reckoning for the promotion itself. The farewell is framed as loud, chaotic, and emotional, fitting for a team that embodied ECW's anarchic spirit, and the article quietly asks what ECW becomes once one of its most recognizable acts moves on, a question that lingers beneath the surface. International wrestling takes center stage in He Scores, covering Nobuhiko Takada's title win over Keiji Muto, a major moment in Japanese wrestling that sends ripples through the industry. The article frames Takada's victory as both a shock and a statement, reinforcing the legitimacy of shoot style, influences, and reminding readers that Japan is not just an alternative scene, but a parallel universe operating at the same time, often with higher stakes and fewer safety nets. One of the issue's most powerful pieces is Let's Talk with Shane Douglas, described as the most biting interview in Power Slam history, and it earns that description. Douglas reflects openly on his WWF run as Dean Douglas, his frustrations with creative direction, and his reclamation of identity as the franchise in ECW. The tone is raw, confrontational, and unapologetic, with Douglas positioning himself not as bitter but as honest. And whether readers agree with him or not, the interview feels like a manifesto for a different kind of wrestling star, one defined by voice and conviction rather than corporate polish. That sense of impact carries into It's Clobbering Time, which focuses on Vader's arrival in the WWF, documenting his destruction at the Royal Rumble and the following Raw tapings, and immediately positioning him as a top-level threat. The article emphasizes physicality, intimidation, and presence, framing Vader as a necessary jolt of danger in a company that had sometimes leaned too heavily on spectacle without consequence. And speculation runs high about how this monster fits into WrestleMania 12. Visually, the issue reinforces realism with the centerfold of WWF World Champion Bret Hart sporting a visible black eye, an image that quietly underscores the toll of the profession and the physical cost behind the championships and headlines. Alongside that, the fan-selected pinup feature highlights Sonny, reminding readers that personality and presentation remain powerful currencies in the business. The latter half of the issue dives deep into news coverage, chronicling Raw tapings, title changes, storyline developments, and business moves across the WWF, WCW, and ECW, from Yokozuna's direction shift and Roddy Piper's appointment as WWF president, to WCW's ongoing momentum with Randy Savage, Sting, and Lex Luger, and ECW's evolution around Raven. International coverage expands the scope even further, with reports from New Japan, All Japan, FMW, IWA Japan, and All Japan Women, reinforcing Power Slam's global perspective and its insistence that wrestling cannot be understood through a single lens. And woven throughout the entire issue are the ads, which are just as telling as the articles themselves. Back issue offers, video releases, tape trading culture, and mail-order promotions aimed squarely at fans who want more than television can provide. These ads sell access, exclusivity, and knowledge, promising deeper immersion into a world where information is currency and being ahead of the curve matters, and they reflect a fan base that is more informed, more demanding, and more globally connected than ever before. Why does this issue matter? Because it captures wrestling at a moment of uncertainty and possibility, where no single company has complete control, where voices like Shane Douglas are pushing back against the machine, where international wrestling is demanding respect, and where fans are being asked to think critically about what they are watching and why they love it. If this issue brought something back for you, drop a comment telling me which feature hit hardest. Shawn's Rumble victory, Douglas's interview, Vader's arrival, or the Takada shock. Hit like if Power Slam was part of how you understood wrestling in the 1990s. Share this with someone who lived through the Monday Night Wars, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. See you next time. Farewell from the Empire State.